What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Under Construction with KT. I'm KT, and I have a really cool guest with me today, a #1 bestselling author of the book, The Woman in Apartment 2, and a long-term friend of mine. I think we just figured out it's been about 15 years that we've known each other and worked together for many of those years. But just a great father, a great friend, a great leader, and a great author, which is kind of your newest endeavor. But yeah, Mr. Paul Spinella, welcome to Under Construction, my friend. Great to see you. How have you been?
Yeah, thanks, man. That's a lot of greatness you threw out there. I've been great, wonderful, blessed in
Great,
many
great.
ways. Yeah. So very excited to see your face and honored to be a guest on this terrific platform and podcast that you've put together in such a short period of time. So
Yeah,
excited to hear more about that too.
short period of time. It's funny that you said that because like we were just kind of talking about that no one sees the work, behind the scenes. And it took me a long time to start, right? And it was all part of that like anxiety of like putting yourself out there and getting going. And I mentioned in one of my podcasts, like I bought this equipment probably a year and a half or a year before I did my first podcast. I had it set up for probably 6 to 8 months before I did my first podcast. So
No
like
way.
yeah. So a short period of time, yeah. Once I got going, it's been pretty quick. And I've been trying. I've missed a couple weeks, but I've been trying to do one every week. And this will be the sixth episode. So yeah, it's been fast once you get started. But yeah, nothing gets going until the work starts. But there's a lot of preparation going into it, right?
Yeah, no doubt. So was this the vision from day one? Under construction was the vision, or like did it evolve as you spent 6 to 8 months staring at your setup?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the truth, man. Just looking at it every day, and it's like looking in the mirror, it's like just sitting there saying, "Hey, I'm right here. All you got to do is turn me on, and press the button. Let's go." And
Yeah.
it's completely evolved on its own, 100%. And when I was starting to think of names, the name kind of came from some conversations with other people. Originally there was going to be me and someone else doing this together, and that kind of fell, by the wayside. And I really didn't know what what it was going to be. When I wrote my description before I did my first podcast, my first episode, and when I read it, and what was kind of maybe in my mind and what was on paper wasn't totally in alignment, but it made sense to me. And the podcast itself has evolved on its own. My first episode, I just did a quick solo one and got it out there. I need to get it out there. And then I did a guest, and then I did a solo, and then I did a guest. That kind of developed that pattern. And with my solo episodes, I've been able to connect them to something that I'm actively working on, and that's under construction for me. And a lot of it is stuff that in the past I was I was better at, even, things, maybe some things that I lost along the way, and just kind of reminding myself of what needs to be done to kind of get me through certain things, right? So it's kind of evolved into that, which is really cool. And I'm super excited about having you on here because I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about relationships. Your book was kind of birthed from a relationship that you had. And I want to talk about that a little bit because um that was a huge section of your life where we weren't as involved with each other as we used to be, obviously working together. But there was a time you came and visited me early on, and when you were like, kind of, the book was just kind of you're starting to write it. And we got to spend time together then. That was post breakup. And I want to kind of talk about like where you were when you started writing the book. How long had you been? How long from the time you kind of split to when you started writing the book? How much time went by, and where were you at in that process?
I was in it, dude. Absolutely in it. And yeah, it's such a hot mess. We were trying to figure out when specifically in the summer of 21 I was there. I think it was probably June. And that relationship had ended like late March, early April. So, 2 months post departure. And I thought I had actually finished the book, or at least most of it by then. I kind of had an initial first draft within probably 6 weeks. And I remember spending that time with you, and dude, it exposed even just more a greater wounding in the sense of, and maybe this is something you and I share, which is, my life historically has moved very fast. There's always been this desire to sort of satiate this need of just accomplishment, right? And so it's kind of just when someone says jump, it's like, all right, absolutely. How high? Like I'm going, I'm in. There wasn't really a lot of thought. And this was the first time where I really sat in my shit. Second time where I really sat in my shit. But the first time was when the mother of my kids and I had separated. And so there was a lot of themes there, and there was a lot of weight there. And most of that was around sort of my father wounding, and what it meant to be now a single father and to co-parent and to raise two kids, one of which is special needs, and a lot of storytelling that came with that. And so a majority of my time was spent around that, and today, praise God, I'm relatively a full-time dad. My kiddos are with me a majority of the time. And so everything has worked out really well. And that was sort of the situation for this relationship, that had inspired the book. Was I had this house, I had my kids, we're clawing out of a pandemic. I'm on the second half of my 30s, right? And it just seemed, and I met someone that I thought, on paper, there was a lot of things to get excited about, and it fell off really fast and helped me recognize that there was patterns to the quality of relationships, and the type of individual that I was attracted to, very, very, very much chasing after someone instead of being comfortable with where I was at. And yeah, so I think it was like 2 months in, and I remember I had missed my flight, and I was so excited, and I could tell you were like, dude, just get out of here. But I remember I was like, dude, I'll just come back to your place, and I'll heat up some leftovers and I'll just write my book. And I think that was really the first time you and I had a conversation on the book in any context. But yeah, I remember just sitting in your kitchen island, dude, from like, whatever time it was, 7:30 at night until like 4 in the morning, just drafting away. So thank you for that.
No, I was super excited when you came that summer because obviously I'd gone through a divorce about a year earlier, and we're kind of, and that was a 10-year relationship, 10-year marriage, children
Yeah.
involved and all that stuff, and we were kind of both in that same spot. So when you first started writing the book, and kind of who were you writing to?
Dude, I love that question. What really inspired the book was, I had leaned on my therapist who I've been with since 2018. So since the mother of my kids and I had separated, this was the guy that helped guide me through a lot of that. And I had called him immediately following the end of this relationship, and I was like, dude, like there's a pattern here, like something's going on, And he was super apologetic and kind of, said something along the lines of like, I'm sorry we didn't catch this sooner, but like, I'm here if you want to do the work. And so I remember it was probably our second or third session, just various storytelling, retelling like, this happened and then she said this, and I think that's what she said, or I think that's what happened. Um, and I remember getting to a point of like, you know what? Like, I'm going to write this down, right? This is that sense of accomplishment. I was like, you know what, Rick, for our next session, I'm going to come in with notes, right? Like, I'm going to write down everything. So, like, there's no bias lens and you could just hear the story. So that was what really was the motive initially for drafting sort of the story of our relationship. Was it was more of like a drafted timeline that I could bring into therapy and we could solve, because I drafted it out, right? Like here's the map of the relationship. Tell me where I went wrong. So it was a very, very sort of self-centered motive under this cusp of, um, right? Like this is sort of the true story. I'm not inserting a biasy, right? Like this is what happened. Here's the, the historical timeline of this relationship from start to end. What do I need to do different next time? Really just wanted to kind of solve it. And I feel like probably a typical dude brain too, right? It's like, just tell
Right.
me what I did wrong and I won't do it again next time. And then we're good. And, I just kept writing and writing. And then I remember I sent it to a friend of mine, who is also kind of going through very early stages of going through stuff. And this is someone that's older than us, kind of like a father figure, really good dude, one of my best friends, and like a mentor, you know? And so I remember he called me every day for about 6 months, checking in during this time. And I remember sharing with him, I think, I started writing, I think it might be a book, and he had asked to read it. And, this was very, very early on, and he read it and loved it and just encouraged me to keep going and insisted that this was something I needed to get out to others. And so that was when I think it shifted for me in realizing that there's some universal themes here. We all struggle with self-love. We all struggle with self-worth. We all have these metaphorical boxes in our basement, you know, that we hope nobody ever asks us to unpack or move or touch. You know, like we bury a lot of stuff, and a lot of that is also kind of put there by other people in our lives, you know, and before we know it, we're cluttered. And yeah, it's just, you know, and then just the more I've shared, the more I've realized there's a lot of similarities here. A lot of us have, you know, codependency, trust issues, toxic relationships with ourself. Most of us don't know what self-love and self-worth look like, or how to find it, and how to do it in a healthy way, because there's a fine line there too, you know? So yeah, it was a journey in totality. That was the start. It took, I think, 3 years from thinking I was done in about 6 weeks to 3 years of actually getting published. A lot of rewrites, a lot of edits, you know, a lot of creative that went into it as well. I had a great editor that just challenged and encouraged me. Her things to me was, you're in this pain. This is the time to keep writing, because when you heal, you're not going to be able to tap into this source. And
Yeah, that's one of the things
yeah,
I was kind of wondering about was the, you know, from start to finish, did writing the book help you get through the pain? Or was it at the end of the book, were you still kind of there? Was that whole process of writing the book and getting it published and all of that stuff, because you're living in that moment that caused the pain, right?
it definitely helped. It took a while, but it definitely helped. There were times I think where it probably kept me stuck, especially when I started working with my editor very early on. Because I think when I was with you, I was getting ready to center the first draft. So, you know, it was like 2 months, 3 months post relationship, and then having to tell a complete stranger, you know, like, well, this is the purpose of this chapter, or this is what I was going, or this is what I experienced, right? Like it was very personal and raw. And to get that back, or just get very, you know, abstractive and objective feedback was jarring. Or, you know, then to hear things like, hey, I could tell you're still in this pain point, right? Like I need you to dig deeper. It's not enough. And, you know, so I would imagine it's very similar to probably what an actor must experience, you know, like it was a very personal experience. And so to have to dig deeper, or to have to retell something in a different way, in a different tone, you know, for the 30th time, it took a while, but it was, at the end, I think it was very helpful. And in psychology, there actually is, they call it expressive and creative writing, which are actually sort of therapeutic modalities that a therapist might encourage. Most common phrasing, you know, we hear is like journal, but essentially expressive and creative writing could help get the thoughts from the brain to paper. And a lot of times, you know, that can help us move beyond the story, and it does create some healing.
Yeah, I can imagine that does, like that 3 years or so was needed, because when the book ends, I mean, you can't be left in that pain. It's got to somehow, the book has the end, the story has the end. You know, people have to move on. You had to move on from it. So I can imagine that try thinking you'd be done at 6 weeks was definitely an, you know, over rotating a little bit, because that takes a long time. I mean, getting out of, I mean, you weren't even healed from the relationship. I mean, we knew that, like the time you spent with me, there was still, you know, we could tell, like neither one of
It
us
was
were.
obvious.
Yeah. So to think that you could have written a book about that and about the pain, really, and about getting through the pain. So what are something you would tell someone that maybe is stuck in that, other than obviously reading your book? What are some advice that you could give people, that just to kind of help regain that self-worth, or gain it for the first time, even the importance of therapy and getting it out? What do you say to those guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just said one thing really well. I'm a huge fan, and I write about this in the book of seeking out helpers. So therapists, coaches, all of the above. I've used all of the above. Uh, I highly recommend, finding the courage and confidence to find a very, very good therapist that aligns to your values. When I sought Rick out, I wanted to make sure that I was finding someone that was faith centered, and someone that was in a heteronormative, cisgender marriage. That was important to me because I wanted to be able to have that space for empathy and sympathy. For them to understand, while I was never married to the mother of my kids, we were together for 6 years, engaged for 5, and we had 2 kids. It, you know, emotionally, it was a divorce. And I wanted to be able to sit across from a therapist who understood the significant weight of what that would mean, but also have, decades of experience married, which I thought at that time brought wisdom, right? And could help kind of pull me through it. So find a therapist that fits wherever you're at, and whatever's important to you, but also where you want to be. And definitely find a coach. All the love that you want to give to them, find a way to just turn it inward. Um, and it starts small, but just think about all the things that you're grateful for, all the things that you can appreciate about yourself. Even if it's one thing at a time, come up with a mantra. I had a very good friend, who we both know, encouraged me to do that. And that was really helpful. I actually, my wife framed it. Can I turn this camera? Is that
Yeah,
cool? Will that,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Your thing.
I don't know if you could see it, but I had this written in Sharpie on my bathroom mirror, and I said it for months, and it took time, but I am a father. I am a leader. I am abundance. I am strong. I am a son of God. I am a servant of God. I am worthy. I am able to receive. I am ready. I am growth oriented. I am a student, reader, learner, and teacher. I am grace and glory, and I am love. And I
Wow.
said that every single morning before my shower and every single night, when I was brushing my teeth, and I would just say it over and over and over again out loud internally. Yeah. So find something, and to find a way to really just, I think a lot of times when we're healing, whether it's, a traumatic experience, an expired relationship, parents, grief, the loss of someone, right? We spend so much time talking about the love that we had that we no longer have, but we have that here, And so my last thing would be, it's also a great time to explore significance and purpose, like for me, it deepened my relationship with God. And I realized that that could look differently for everyone. I highly encourage, find something outside of yourself, not someone, but something, whether it's, a traditional church or or something, that's spiritually rooted, but you have to find something greater than yourself. And that's not my higher self, because that's still you just with wrapped in ego, right? Like there has to be something else there to help provide clarity and peace and significance, as you're going through the grieving and the healing. And then the last piece is, take time. And that also looks different for everyone. It could be 3 months, it could be 3 years, it could be 30 years. But as long as you're working on yourself, just trust the process and allow time to just move. It's okay if you're still sad 3 months or 3 years from now, as long as you're proactively trying to find a way to find peace.
Yeah, no, that's all really good stuff and great advice. I love the mantra, and one of the lines in there was, I think you said, "I'm able to receive," or "I'm ready to receive." What does that mean to you? What was that about?
Yeah, I'm able to receive. That was about love. That was about love. That was about peace. I felt like I never understood what love was. I never really had it modeled for me, growing up as a child. I want to say as a parent, growing up as a child in my home. There were plenty of times where I felt like the parent. So that Freudian slip should tell you everything you need to know, right? My parents just modeled love in a very unique way. My dad was very avoidant, and dismissive and authoritative, which is a very interesting blend. Like my way or the highway. but then also, like didn't really show any other emotion, and like if I did, he would just shut down. So that was kind of really tough. And then my mom was very, sort of like anxious avoidant. So everything was a big deal, but we can never talk about it.
Right.
And so that taught me at a very young age that I could just suppress when things don't feel comfortable. And that walking on eggshells is just the flooring that I'll have in every single home because that's what I grew up on. That's comfort. And so I sought that out and I tried to recreate that everywhere I went. And so when I came across people that were very avoidant, but also very, very my way or the highway, and probably like, hey, I want nothing to do with you, I was like, man, that's the person that I'm gonna pursue because they want nothing to do with me and they're kind of mean. And that
Yeah,
makes
and that's what
sense.
you were attracted to. That's what you were like, that's the whole, like, you thought that's what was gonna fill the hole, right? That type of
100%.
behavior. Yeah.
We repeat what we know until we can learn something new. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I emphasize once again, especially in the book, like seek out the helpers because, they're there for a reason. I've been blessed to have a great therapist. I've had a couple great therapists. I've also had two really terrible therapists. And so, like find a good one, but when you find a good one, man, like they were absolutely made to be in that position, you know?
Yeah, and I see a lot of value in therapy. I've done it a little bit when I was going through my divorce, and it started out as couples counseling, and it kind of turned into me going a couple times by myself. I never pursued it or continued it. I really wanted to. It was in Spinella, so it was very expensive. I mean, it is what it is. But I see a lot of value in it, and I think I said this before. Like before, I actually walked into one of those rooms and sat down and saw the value, and it, like, you couldn't have convinced me to walk, you couldn't have paid me to go in, and but it's definitely worth it. And I think a lot of men have that kind of stance. It's like an ego, like, what is someone gonna tell me,
Right.
about my personal life, but just unpacking, and even if you just can get unpacked, it's that's a huge step forward. And there's a lot to we all have a lot to unpack. Like you said, the boxes in our basement are gathering dust. And I think, like you said, having someone that is good at that job, they're going to help you unpack that in a healthy way. And
Yeah.
that's one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We all know like spring cleaning, right? And so it does require delicate hands but it is something we have to do often. I mean, I go back to Rick, annually, and sometimes I spend 1 to 2 plus years with him. So, find your cadence and absolutely you got to trust the relationship. And also in today's world, there's so many folks like myself who offer the coaching side, and then there's the licensed therapists, some of which, most of which still take insurance, some are cash pay only. And then there's all these terrific apps, right? That I don't know if we could say any of their names on here.
I don't know
But
either. Say
there's,
whatever you want.
yeah, but right, there's a huge option for telehealth, which
Yes.
really, really increased, because of the pandemic. Like that was, in my mind, that was one of the positives, positive outcomes of that experience for us. So like, so I always share with everybody, the opportunity to actually connect with someone and be vulnerable has never been greater. I had to walk into an office in 2018 and sit, as I refer to on the book, on an uncomfortable couch, with a hot cup of coffee next to me, and yeah, and just share, vulnerably share, and yeah, and also in saying all that, also, share your timeline, but find the courage and confidence to share. There were a lot of things that I remember thinking in that first go around with Rick, like, I don't need to share this part because it's not really related or it doesn't really have significance anymore, so I'll just like share like up to this part. But really recognizing that in order to rebuild, you have to demo not just the frame, but sometimes the foundation. And when you're in the foundation and you're that far underground, right? You're 8 feet plus underground. That's the best time to rebuild. So like, don't just demo, the inside, like destroy that whole thing. get to the root of whatever the pain is and the story is. No matter how wild it may sound, no matter how uncomfortable it may sound, like they're not there to judge you. They're not there to ridicule you. To your point, they are there to help you and equip you with the opportunities to unpack those boxes one at a time and carefully talk about everything that's in each box.
Yeah, and there's a lot of power in that, and it's one of the it's probably the first step in really healing from anything. Because we'll keep those things in the box, and yeah, they're down there. They're not physically hurting us, or it's not, out of sight, out of mind. But doing the work to get through it certainly is going to help you stack less boxes in the future as well.
I believe that there's no such thing as healed. We're either healing or hurting. And healed people heal people, and hurt people hurt people, right? So when we're in a place of needing healing, we need to have the wisdom to decipher who we're surrounding ourselves with and with what we are doing. And I think as men, women as well, but different, destruction is often the easy path, right? The substances, the parties, the hookups, the one night stands, all of those bad life decisions, right, are very easy to escape to. And they're very welcoming and they're very comforting and they're very numbing until they're not. So healing is, it is a journey. And no matter how much you can, at least for me, no matter how many boxes I've unpacked at 41 years of age, married with two kids, there's still moments where, my wife will humble me as recent as today, where I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, it's me. I'm the
Oh,
problem, you know?
a little
So,
Taylor Swift.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a beautiful thing to when you find a safe relationship. I'm also a big fan that we all seek safety, security, and connection. Those are like the core needs that I emphasize on. And so when you have a relationship, you are responsible for creating a safe space for yourself and for your partner. They are responsible for creating a safe space for you and themselves, right? And you are both responsible for that connection, both to self, to each other, and something greater than yourselves, right? And you figure out whatever that order is. Don't put the kids first, don't put the hobbies first, don't put the job first, right? For me, it's God, my wife, my kids, and then everything else. Like that everything else might kind of shift a little bit. There's times where maybe work's more important than hobbies and leisure, but none of those things are ever going to be more important than those three. That is our pyramid. And that is our core and that is our foundation. And if there's ever a time where something is off in my life, I go back to those pillars, right? Of faith, of family, of fitness. And I just try to figure out, like, where am I in this? Am I putting God first? Am I putting my wife, next? Am I, leading an active, healthy lifestyle? Or did I have way too much fun this weekend that dovetailed into this week? And now this, all of those things could throw me off. And so the responsibility that I believe I own in relationship to building a safe, secure, connected relationship is that sort of trinity.
So what else I mean, that's a huge thing, but I'm sure some of those old habits, old patterns, things we kind of let go of, the things that didn't serve us, that were just a distraction, when they start creeping in, aside from, grounding yourself with God, your wife, and your kids and the pyramid, what else do you kind of do to mitigate them creeping in and kind of, showing their ugly head again?
Yeah, dude. So I love learning things. That was one of the many gifts that came from that, the relationship that inspired the book. I love learning things that I don't know, right? And so like one of the things that I took up during that time was dance lessons, right? Single dude walking
So
into a dance studio. And what I didn't realize at the time was that there is such a connection between body and music, right? And you have to get out of here and you have to trust the pattern and trust the flow, right? And trust the process. And one has to lead and one has to follow. And so there was so much healing that had occurred in simply just as a dude taking that brave step into a dance studio and going, it's just me, right? There's no wedding, there's nothing going on. I just don't know how to dance and I want to learn how to dance. And learning salsa and rumba and waltz with your dance instructor, especially on the days when it was a dude, it's very intimate and it's very vulnerable. And it was really cool. And so today I box twice a week. And I'm my trainer is a professional boxer. I think his pro record is 9-1 or 9-0. And he just turned 30. So he's full of piss and vinegar. And my wife and I joke about it all the time. In one of my early sparring sessions, I kind of like, when the round was over, I like just like fell down into a squat position, and he was like, get up. And I was like, man, I was like, I need some water. And he goes, you don't need water, you just need oxygen. And so like there's just something really, really, really cool about that, you know? And then another time, I was sparring with this one sparring partner I spar with often, and he jabbed me twice, like square in the face, really, really good. And my nose just gushed. And we kept going. But as soon as it happened, he quickly apologized as he's still throwing, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's all your fault, Phil. It's my fault. And my coach just yells, that's right, it is. You should have blocked it. So, like those things, dude, those things, man, life is this beautiful adventure. And when we have the courage to step into uncomfortable settings, like putting on boxing gloves and learning how to box, and then being told you're going to spar today with Chris, and someone's actually punching you, you know, um, it builds things that we
Mm.
can't get anywhere else, you know. And it's a safe setting, right? Like I know, yeah, you might break my nose, there might be blood, but you're not going to knock me out, right? And my coach is here, and he's very adamant on that, right? There's rules of engagement, right? So like there's just something really beautiful about expanding that vulnerability, but still having a semblance of guardrail to know, like, I'm okay, right? Like I might get clipped, I might get hit, I might bleed, I might bruise, but like I'm not going to die, right?
And like just doing anything that you getting out of your comfort zone, like we talked earlier, man, how long it took me to put, turn this equipment on and do it. But once I finally got that first one out, it's like, you start going, something clicks in there. And like, it's got to be the same thing with like being able to manage relationships and go into relationships, making sure the healthy groundwork is laid, the healthy boundaries are laid. And that's something I don't do very well, I think. When I finally decide I'm going to basically let someone have access to me, I I give all access, right?
Yeah.
If that's my person. And
You
if
go all
you
in.
yeah, and if you and I put up I'll put up a lot because I know that I'm different than other people. I'm willing to help. I'm willing, like that's what I do. I'm willing to help people 100% of the time. Not everyone's like that, and I understand that. I understand differences, but I will let kind of things not go on set or unaddressed, because I kind of use that excuse like, well, not everyone's like me, not everyone would operate like me, not everyone would, see these signs, or these kind of like red flags that or just recognize, when someone's not having a great day, and they need that other person that they're all in for to kind of be all in for them in that moment. Going back to boundaries, I think that's probably one of the most important things. And one of my other podcast guests, we talked about how he set boundaries and his wife set boundaries early on with their communication, and how that's helped them, get to where they are now. What were some of the, like, early on, before you kind of transformed and got yourself to a point where you are recognizing the right things, and you are putting in the right work and the right behaviors, when you were thinking about boundaries, what do you do now differently than you did back then?
Yeah. Good question. No, short answer is no. I didn't know what a boundary was, until I sat down on Rick's couch and he asked me what my boundaries were. And it's like, I don't know, man. What does that even mean? You
What does
tell
that
me,
even mean?
Rick.
Yeah.
Isn't this why I'm paying
Can you
you?
give me
You
some
know, like,
examples?
right, yeah. Can I buy a vowel? What does this look like? And similar, Lee, to you, right? Like high achiever professionally, willing to sacrifice, um, literally everything: time, energy, effort, sleep, if it meant serving and supporting the broader enterprise and my team, right? Like, right, I had no qualms about being the sole voice or lone voice, in a room if I thought that there was any, compromise to morality and ethics and
And
just
I want to
the
stop you
quality
there.
of people.
I don't want you to lose your thought, but this is something that I was thinking about earlier. I want you to keep going, but this is something that I've always admired about you, man. And I always knew, like, being your friend and being a really good friend, you were always someone that I knew, if you were in a room with 30 other people and they were compromising my integrity, you were going to stand up for me. And you do that for people that you care about, and I've always appreciated that about you, dude. And I didn't want to forget to say that, and you were kind of like, that's very true what you're saying, and you are that person. You will have people's back, if it means, even if it means, losing some people's respect or whatever. You're going to stand up for what's right, especially when it comes to your people. And that's a very good trait, and that's something that's not very common out there. So I appreciate you for that, man. But continue.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, so, leveraging my voice in those settings was something that I felt I did well. Doing that in home, with a significant other, I didn't even know the first place to start. Because once again, it was never modeled for me, and so spending that time with Rick, I really thought that I got to a place where I understood what boundaries were. I thought that like they were rules, right? And so like a boundary is, I'm not going to be with you if you cheat on me. Um, and it wasn't until this last relationship where, one, going into it, I realized that, man, my boundaries, you could manipulate the crap out of them. If your clothes were off and if there were drinks being poured, it didn't have to be that important to me anymore, or if you begged and pleaded and cried and were like, but I don't like it, I'd be like, okay, it's not that important. We could do what you want to do. And it didn't matter um, how significant, that other option was. If the challenge to my boundary meant me sabotaging and self-sacrificing my wants, needs, and desires, but it allowed you to stay, or at least I thought, right? Like, well, you'll stay if we do what you want to do. We don't have to do what I want to do. We'll just do what you want to do, even though I was like, I really don't want to do that. I didn't know how to communicate that. And so that was also one of the gifts coming out of this, with a lot of reflection and therapy and very immersive therapeutic experiences this time around. I did things like EMDR and a couple other things uh, that were very, very helpful. But finally coming out of that, I realized boundaries aren't necessarily for my partner. There's a significant difference between what are the agreements within the relationship, you know? So like if you and I are together, right? Like what are some things that we're going to agree in terms of how we're going to handle conflict, how we're going to handle finances, how we're going to raise children, how we're going to worship, how we're going to clean, how we're going to cook, right? Like what are those agreements? Those are agreements. Those aren't boundaries. I think a lot of times boundaries gets either misused or overused. Um, a boundary, at least from my perspective, a boundary is, what are my rules of engagement for me in order for me to feel safe, seen, and heard. And if I don't feel safe, seen, and heard, then I probably don't need to either participate in this conversation, be in this room, or be with this person. And so they don't always have to be spoken, but they have to be that sort of moral compass for, the quality of relationships that Chris wants to be in. If this person is not living up to that, right? So like if one of my boundaries is to be in a committed monogamous relationship, if my partner is not doing that, that's not something I should have to speak about, right? But if my partner's not doing that, especially early on, then like that's okay. I'm gonna have to call a hard stop. We're not, this isn't good for me. So I would say that that's it's one of the best ways to think about boundaries is, think about all the things that you want in a relationship. Think about all the things that you need in a relationship, and whatever that list of needs are, not like self needs, not like, well, I need someone who's going to cook for me every day. No, 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 no. Like you could survive if that didn't happen, right? What are you really, really looking for, Um, and what do you need in order for you to stay safe, seen, heard? Will that becomes the start of what boundaries are.
No, I love that. And I relate to that. I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, because the wants are most of the wants you could probably toss away. And most of the wants, especially I think for men, are gonna be very superficial, right? Like, do you want it or do you need it? Like everybody might want this, but what do you really need, and
Yeah.
how do you want to grow in that relationship, right? So and then whatever's left on the wants, in my mind, that becomes then the agreeables, right? So like what I want, Chris, in a relationship is to make sure that there's financial transparency and there's financial agreement upon, any purchases and expenses beyond X, and that we're good stewards of our money, that we save, but we also have fun with it, that we can give and donate that and make sure that our kids are taken care of. And so that type of conversation had with my wife, and finding agreement on that becomes our agreement. That's the want, right? Like we both want to use money the same way. We both want to spend time in a very similar way, which is either, in service, or with family, or just with one another. And so how people spend their time and money and the types of friendships or relationships they have and how they use those, are also really big indicators. If you don't know what red flags are or what your red flags are, think about it in that way. Like all the relationships that I've been in, how did they, where was sort of the morality? How did they spend their paycheck? How did they spend their time? Did they spend their time partying and I'm a gym rat? Or, I like to read and they like to, have a beer on the driveway with the neighbors every day, like what are those differences? And were those enough to create that erosion and that reason for the end? If it's something you could live with it and they support it, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it together, but they always got to support and champion you. And you should never
Yeah.
have to sacrifice that for the relationship. And you should
Yeah.
also, sorry, last note,
No, no, no.
don't ever parent your partner ever. So I know that's something I had to learn, right? I know you and I are similar. We're both high achievers and overachievers, right? And so this desire, this thought of like, like I might see things differently than most people, or I might be able to help in better ways or different ways than most people. Um, it's really we're what I learned was I was really putting on a codependent cape. I was trying to be a superhero, and I was doing that because I didn't have the courage to take the cape off and stand in front of the mirror and go, but what does Paul need, and what is Paul wanting, and how am I addressing Paul's needs and wants before I could go put the oxygen mask on Chris. And so, yeah, if you find yourself having to parent your partner, bail them out with money, help them pay their rent, solve their problems for them, not that solving problems, like that's a collective, but if you're constantly that person, you're probably showing up as a parent, not a partner.
Yeah, no, that's all really good stuff. Your your morals and probably your values have to be pretty much in alignment, but your wants can be out of alignment a little bit as long as they fit inside your boundary, right? So that's really good. And I can relate to, you going back to where you said, I'll sacrifice my wants and needs and desires to kind of make sure that you stay around or, cause my love language is quality time and physical touch. I want, I said, when I go all in or when I'm with someone or when I want to be with someone, I want to be with them. I want to spend the time with them. And that's you got to understand how other people receive love and you got to understand how you receive love and also understand how you give it because if you don't understand how your partner receives love and how you give love, you could be way out of alignment and eventually that's going to surface and it's going to cause conflict, I think. But yeah, I can align with that a lot. And I would always oftentimes, whether it's a romantic relationship, personal relationship, whatever it is, I always want to make the people that I'm all in with. And, you can call it love because, I love my friends just like, I love my, just like I would my family. But the people that I love, I want to make sure that they're getting what they, and I will sacrifice myself for that. So one thing that I'm really working on, and part of the reason why I've probably been single for I don't know how since you were here, is just because I someone or maybe my early on expectations are so high that if I see one thing, I'm like, okay, that I'm good. I'm good with that. And I'm kind of like, I feel like I kind of need to loosen that up and identify what's really important to me and what's really important to me in relationships to kind of get through that. And I don't even look, I'm not looking for someone right now. Do I want someone that I can trust and that I can love and that I know I can say if if no matter what, they're always going to have my back. There's never going to be somewhere where I know that they're going to put me in jeopardy, that safety part, or put my integrity in question. They're always going to be, looking at us as we're in this together. And finding that, it sounds like you found that, but finding that is very hard. And you can't do that if you don't have those boundaries within yourself, and those boundaries 100% are for you. I don't date, or I don't have a girlfriend or like that. I rely on my friends, and I go out and I have a very small circle. I keep a few people close, and those are the people that I give my love to. And but it does get lonely, man. And it does, it does wear on you. So, but that's something I'm working on. I appreciate what you said about all of that, because I can really relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. We were built for connection. So, the lonely piece, that's um I want to say that's normal. I hate that word though. I mean, that's understandable, right? Like the
Well,
lonely
it's
piece is very understandable for sure.
I
Uh
think feeling that and being alone and not, kind of just falling back into an old cycle is is less painful than being, continuing on something that's not serving me, right?
yes.
It's less damaging. And you're not going to continue to dig holes, so I'd rather be in that space alone than be in that space of chaos.
Yeah, that beautifully said, man. Beautifully said. And I will use this as an opportunity to also validate, like, hey, this is where for me why I get excited to try new things. My wife and I had talked about this. She always jokes around after we've talked about this. She jokes around. She's like, "I know your perfect vacation is like you alone in the woods, you know." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." It was not always that way, very similar to you when I first, did the love language assessment and stuff. I was like, "Well, mine's quality time and physical touch too, and so it makes sense that I'm so clingy, right?"
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but man, dude, like for me, healing uh all of that wound, that cling was really the inner child wanting to be seen, wanting to feel safe, wanting to be heard, wanted to be played with, wanted to be loved. And once I was able to figure that out and find a way to soothe that and to solve that, it really made a significant difference. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my wife and kids. I live for them. I will die for them. I would do anything possible, within the realm of morals and ethics for them. Um, but like I also know that there's there's a lot that this life has to offer, and that sense of like, hey, it can get lonely. um the two things I'll end on is, that's also why in the beginning when you were asking some of the things that I had sort of structured, I pushed for having some semblance of faith. And once again, I don't, I'm very agnostic to what that is, but there has to be something that gets you out of bed aside from your head, and two, just those adventures, and there's a lot of community out there, and it's hard, right? Dating in a digital age is very hard, but being a human being in a digital age is not that hard.
Yeah.
Like find one of the other things I did to heal was I found a coffee shop here, and it was, small locally owned coffee shop. So I got to know the crew, and I got to go in there, and there were books and there were cozy couches, and it was like something out of Friends. And before long they knew who Paul was and they knew what Paul was ordering, and so it kind of felt comforting. There was a small sense of home there. And then same with the diner, and then same with my gym, and then, same with the dance instructor. All of a sudden, it wasn't necessarily weird to dance with a dude because it's three
Yeah.
months
No.
in, and
Yeah.
and he knows my kids' names and my story, and I know what him and his girlfriend did for the weekend, and so like we can build relationships with others, and still find a way to satiate that need of sort of loneliness, and do it while we're healing in a very healthy way, because you're spot on. It is so much better to be in that place than it is to sacrifice yourself for the sake of and fear of being alone and ending up in a very unhealthy, toxic relationship. And then before we know it, it's 5 years later, and that's a lot of time.
It is, and it goes by quick, and you know, I've especially people like you and I, we will let that time go by, but it takes I give you a lot of time to do that, and a lot of opportunity, and I think that's maybe one of the boundaries in my or one of the things that I need to speak up more about in my in you know in my friendships, relationships, whatever it is, but um yeah, man,
That sort of fear of loneliness, and instead it
yes,
right, like lean into it, live in it, but also find that
yeah,
community outside of self and outside of relationship, right? So whether it's
that's
the local diner or the local coffee shop or the local bookstore or the local church or the local, animal shelter where, maybe just every Wednesday, from 6 to 7, you're going to go walk a dog. Like create new rituals, create
yeah,
new habits that put you out there doing the things you love to do, but with others, right? Go sign up for that, 30-day challenge at Orange Theory. You never know who you're going to meet. One of the other things I did, all of that said, one of the other things I did um, was I started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And after my first day, like rolling around with a dude, we had some small talk, as we
I
were
doubt that was your first day rolling around with
I know, and I realize now that sounded terrible. Rolling around on the mat, right? But we were chatting, and I said something like, he said so. He had asked me, like, what brought you in, and I said, man, I'm just going through a lot right now. And he looked at me, and like we're both just drenched in sweat, right? And he's got the gi, and I just got like basketball shorts and a t-shirt. And he goes, yeah, man, we all are. That's why we're here. And I just thought, like, dude, holy shit, is that deep? You know?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, dude, just think about that. Like, don't be intimidated by, what you're seeing from outside the glass, like I was for a long time, right? These dudes with all these different color belts, doing little arm bars and chokes and, like I'm just not that guy. I can't do that. And then I get there and I find out they're all 30 and 40-year-old dads or divorcees going through shit and that's their time, right? And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah, you'd be surprised at how God will provide people in your way who are also going through the same thing you're going through. And that is such a catalyst for healing.
Yeah, and that's like you touched on dating in the digital world, and yeah, that was I did that a little bit early on, and it's just awful. I don't even know. I did it, and you meet some people. No one's it's not real connections, and then like I got off dating apps, and like 6 months later, I'm like, you know what? Let me go back on. It was the same people. I'm just like, yep, this is deleted, and that was kind of the last time I did that. But one really, who's there? Who's there?
Gonna get
Hey,
crashed big time.
yeah, that's all good,
Can
man.
you say hi to Chris?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Yeah,
I've
good
met you a
job.
long time ago, but you don't remember probably. But yeah, dude, what's really we're getting close to an hour. I wanted to give you an opportunity. You got your book out. You have an awesome Instagram page going, and you share a lot on there. And what else? Talk to us about you do some coaching. So
Yeah, I'm gonna do the cheesy like, and
yep,
here's
do it.
the
Let's do it.
yeah. Yeah, so available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, which is really cool. Just being an avid reader and writer, to say that I have a book on barnesandnoble.com is kind of very humbling and cause worthy of braggadocious. Um but yeah, so The Woman in Apartment 2 is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, soft cover, hardcover, and Audible. You could also check out loveoverlimerence.com, which is my website. And that kind of walks through a little bit more of the coaching services offered. It's a way to get a hold of me as well. There's contact info there as well. And then, of course, my Instagram page. I'm not as active on posting, but I do check the messages. That's also Love Over Limerence. One of the hashtags is You're Not Broken. So I try to post things on there focused on those themes of self-love and self-worth. And then yeah, my wife and I are looking to expand our footprint in terms of service here locally, both from a faith perspective and how we kind of steward couples and individuals. And then this August, currently have my undergrad and grad in psychology, and this August I am also going back to school for the licensure part so I could offer therapeutic services or therapy services as a licensed therapist as well as also a coach.
Can I get a discount on that, or is it, did you like, have friends and family, or
Yeah, we could figure out a good cash
yeah, yeah.
cash pay.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. And I'll tag your handles and stuff up here. But dude, I'm so proud of you. Um, you're someone that I've physically been able to see grow. Like from the time we met and all the time we worked together, and your ability to kind of recognize and see see your gaps and address them and grow from not even mistakes, but just from experiences is really cool to see. And it happens physically right in front of your eyes with you, and I love that. And but I'm just super proud of where you are, your book, everything you've done in your career, family, finally finding happiness in your love relationship is was a big piece of the puzzle. I know that was always a big piece of your puzzle that you wanted to fill, man, and I'm so happy that you've done that. And I just wish you all the luck. Let's keep in touch a little bit better than we have up until now. But yeah, man, I really, yeah, I can't say enough about our friendship and how I feel about you. You're someone that I lean into, even if you don't know it. I'll call and ask you for advice, even if I'm not technically asking. I'll get there eventually. But yeah, just thank you for your friendship and thank you for your continued support. Thank you for supporting me in this, and I just really appreciate you as a friend, a human, a man, and a father, and someone that's really out there living the way they want to live and doing it by their rules, man. I appreciate you for that.
Thank you, brother. I love you. There's a lot of adoration for you. You have quite the legacy. The way in which you show up for others and lead others, and just the human being that you are, and to see this new season and stage of you, and being able to, vulnerably share that with all of us through this podcast and the work you're doing, and the desire to fill that internally. And man, I will forever champion and encourage and support you on the outside. And if you could just give 1/10 of that to yourself that you've given to all of us, I think you're going to find greatness, my man.
And yeah, I got a lot of work to do on myself, as we all do, and that's why that's why the title is under construction, man. We're always working on it, and you've done a
Amen.
good job. You've built, you tore down, you rebuilt, you tore down, and I think you're really building your castle right now, man, and it's awesome to see.
Thank you, brother.